What you're about to hear is the story of a high school science teacher who gave 12 years of his life to one school. Robotics Club, Academic Decathlon, the highest AP scores in the entire district. This guy was basically carrying the science department on his back. And every single year, he asked for a raise. Every single year, they told him teaching was a calling. Then he found out the district just approved $80,000 for a brand new football scoreboard. $80,000 for a scoreboard. What he did next put that entire school into a tailspin they still haven't recovered from. Buckle up. I taught high school science for 12 years, had the best AP scores in the district, and they told me teaching was a calling when I asked for a raise. Then I found out they spent $80,000 on a scoreboard, so I left. I need to get this off my chest because the last few months have been the wildest stretch of my life, and I'm still kind of processing all of it. My name's Bryce. I'm 36 years old, and up until October of last year, I was a high school science teacher at a mid-sized public school in the Midwest. I taught AP Chemistry, AP Physics, and regular biology. I also ran the Robotics Club, coached the Academic Decathlon team, and volunteered for basically every science fair, STEM night, and college prep event the school put on. 12 years. That's how long I was there. Straight out of my credential program at 24, walked in with a box of lab supplies I bought with my own money, and never left. Well, until I did. I want to be clear about something before I get into this. I didn't become a teacher for the money. Obviously. Nobody goes into teaching thinking they're going to get rich. I knew the pay was rough going in. My first year I was making $31,000. In the Midwest, that's not starving, but it's not exactly comfortable either. I had a roommate my first 3 years because I couldn't afford a one-bedroom on my own. We split a two-bedroom duplex near the railroad tracks, and my room was so small that my dresser blocked half the closet door. I drove a 2004 Civic until 2021. The AC went out in 2018, and I just never fixed it. Rolled the windows down in August like it was 1987. I packed my lunch every single day. And I mean every day, not most days. I'm talking Tupperware with last night's leftovers, a banana, and one of those little cheese snack things because I'm a grown adult who still eats string cheese, and I refuse to apologize for it. My parents thought I was nuts, by the way. My dad's an electrician, and my mom works at a dental office, and they both kept dropping hints about how I could make more money doing literally anything else. My dad would call me on Sundays and casually mention that his buddy's son just got hired as an operations manager making 75 grand right out of college. Thanks, Dad. Real helpful. But I loved teaching. I genuinely did. There's this moment when a kid who's been struggling all semester finally gets it. You can see it in their face, this little flash, and nothing else I've ever done comes close to that feeling. The point is, I wasn't expecting to make six figures. I just wanted to be compensated fairly for what I was actually doing, which, and I say this without trying to sound arrogant, was a lot more than what most teachers at my school were doing. Not because they were lazy, most of them were great, but I was putting in 60-plus hour weeks running 3 AP courses and 2 extracurriculars, while also redesigning the entire science curriculum to align with new state standards. That was a full summer project I did for free, by the way. No stipend, nothing. I first asked for a raise in my 4th year. By that point, I was teaching 3 sections of AP Chemistry, 2 of regular biology, and I just started the Robotics Club as an after-school thing. My AP students had just posted the highest scores in the district for the 2nd year running. Not the school, the district. I had kids getting 5s on the AP Chem exam who came into my class barely understanding atomic structure. One kid, a sophomore named Wes who'd been getting C-minuses in regular science, scored a 4 on the AP exam after sitting in on my class for a semester because he was curious. A 4. As a sophomore who wasn't even officially enrolled in the course. I sat down with my department head, a woman named Linda, who'd been teaching for 30 years, laid out the numbers, and she agreed I deserved more. She actually wrote a letter of support and sent it up the chain along with my request. It got denied. Not reduced, denied. The reason I was given, and I swear this is almost word for word, was that teaching is a calling, not a career driven by financial incentive. The principal at the time, a guy I'll just call Dr. Whitfield, told me that with a straight face. In his office, while sitting under a framed photo of himself, shaking hands with the superintendent at some golf fundraiser. I want to be real here. That stung. But I let it go. I was 28. I figured, okay, maybe the budget's tight, maybe next year. Next year came, I asked again. Same answer, different words, same energy. We value what you do, Bryce, but the budget doesn't allow for individual salary adjustments outside the negotiated scale. Cool. Got it. So I kept my head down and kept teaching. By year 7, I had built the robotics club from 6 kids meeting in my classroom after school into a 22-member team that placed 3rd at the state competition. 3rd in the entire state. These were public school kids going up against private academies with 10 times our funding. I paid for half the parts out of pocket. My buddy Nate, who runs an auto repair shop, donated scrap metal and let us use his garage on weekends. We were duct taping servos onto reclaimed aluminum and somehow outperforming teams with sponsored CNC machines. And I loved every minute of it. Those kids were the reason I got up in the morning. I should mention that one of those kids, a junior named Caleb, went on to get a full ride to Georgia Tech for engineering. Sent me a handwritten thank you note his freshman year. I still have it taped inside my desk drawer. Anyway, around year 8, Dr. Whitfield retired. New principal came in, a woman I'll call Mrs. Hadley. Mid-50s, came from the administrative side, never taught a class in her life as far as anyone could tell. She had this vibe like everything was a board meeting and everyone below her was an intern. Smiled a lot but never actually listened to a word you said. You know the type. Nodding along while mentally checking her email. I gave her the benefit of the doubt. New leadership, fresh start, maybe things would change. At my annual review that year, she told me I was, and I remember this because I wrote it down later, a cornerstone of the science program. A cornerstone. She used that exact word. I thanked her and asked if a cornerstone could maybe get a cost of living adjustment since my salary hadn't meaningfully changed in 8 years. She said she'd look into it. She did not look into it. Year 9. Asked again. Denied. Year 10. Asked again. Got a $200 stipend for running the robotics club, which worked out to roughly 60 cents an hour based on the time I actually put in. I know because I did the math on a napkin during lunch one day while eating leftover pasta. Hold on. For the listeners, this is me, not the OP. I need to jump in here because I want you to really sit with what just happened. This man built a robotics team out of scrap metal and string cheese money, sent a kid to Georgia Tech on a full ride, and the school said, here's $200, go buy yourself something nice. $200. That's not a stipend. That's what you tip your barber at Christmas. Mrs. Hadley out here calling this man a cornerstone and then paying him like a doorstop. If undervaluing employees was an Olympic sport, this school district would be banned for doping. But the real kicker? It hasn't even started yet. Year 11 was the breaking point. Or actually, no. Wait, it wasn't the breaking point. It was the year the cracks got too big to ignore. The academic decathlon team I coached won regionals. First time in school history. I'm not exaggerating. First time ever. The local newspaper did a story on it. The school posted about it on their website and their social media. Mrs. Hadley stood next to me in the photo op and told the reporter I was the heart and soul of STEM education at the school. The following week, I submitted a formal written request for a salary review. I included 12 years of AP score data, the robotics team's competition history, the academic decathlon results, student testimonials, letters of support from 3 other teachers, and a spreadsheet comparing my salary to the district average for teachers with equivalent experience and credentials. I even included the state averages. I was making about $11,000 less than the district average and almost $15,000 less than the state average for someone at my level. Mrs. Hadley called me into her office. She had my packet on her desk. I could tell she'd barely looked at it. The pages were still in the same order. No notes, no dog ears, nothing. She told me she appreciated my dedication, but that the district's salary structure was set during collective bargaining, and she didn't have the authority to make individual exceptions. I said, what about a department chair position? A curriculum coordinator role? Anything. She said, and this is a direct quote because it's burned into my brain. Bryce, you're an incredible teacher, but teaching is a calling. The reward is in the work itself. The reward is in the work itself. I didn't say anything. I just nodded. She smiled, said something about how glad she was to have me on the team, and I walked out. That was March. In September, 6 months later, I was in the front office picking up some forms, and I overheard two of the admin assistants talking. One of them mentioned that the school board had just approved a budget request for a new digital scoreboard for the football field. I wasn't eavesdropping on purpose. I was standing right there, and they were talking at normal volume. I asked how much. One of them looked at me and said, $80,000. $80,000 for a scoreboard. At a school where the science lab still had beakers from the Clinton administration, and I was buying my own dry erase markers. I went home that night, and I just sat on my couch for a long time. My dog, a mutt named Diesel, who I got from the shelter in year 6, came and put his head on my lap, and I just sat there scratching his ears and running numbers in my head. 12 years, 5 raise requests, all denied. Total compensation I'd been shorted compared to the state average over that span. Conservatively around $120,000. And they found 80 grand for a scoreboard. I remember thinking about the time I asked Mrs. Hadley for $300 to replace the fume hood in the chem lab because the exhaust fan was making a grinding noise that scared the freshmen. She told me to submit a facilities request, and it would be prioritized. That was 14 months ago. The fan still grinds. I want to be clear. I don't hate football. I don't have anything against the athletes or the coach. This isn't about sports versus academics. This is about being told for 12 years that there's no money, and then watching $80,000 get approved for something that displays numbers on a screen, while a guy who produces the best test scores in the district can't get a cost of living increase. That night, I opened my laptop, pulled up my resume, and realized it still listed recent graduate under the summary. I hadn't touched it in 12 years. 12 years of accomplishments that weren't on paper, because I never thought I'd need them to be. I spent the whole weekend rewriting it, listed every AP score record, every competition result, every curriculum project. It was 3 pages long by the time I was done, which I know is too long for a resume, but honestly, I didn't care. I just needed to see it all written out. I needed to remind myself that I wasn't crazy for wanting more. On Monday, I started applying to private schools. Okay, stop. Let me paint this picture for you because I don't think the math has fully sunk in. $80,000. That's Bryce's raise for the next 5 years, plus enough left over to replace every cracked beaker in that science lab. Instead, they bought a scoreboard, a screen that tells you a number. You know what else tells you a number? The AP exam results that Bryce's students were crushing every year. But sure, let's light 80 grand on fire so the Friday night crowd can see home 14, away 7 in high definition. This is like selling your car engine to buy a bumper sticker. I didn't tell anyone at school I was looking. Not even Linda, my department head, who I trusted completely. I just didn't want it getting back to admin before I had something lined up. I applied to 7 schools total over the course of about 3 weeks. Spent my evenings after grading papers, rewriting cover letters at my kitchen table, while Diesel snored under my chair. I got 3 callbacks within 2 weeks. 2 were from private schools in the area. 1 was from a charter school about 45 minutes away. I went on all 3 interviews and was honest about why I was leaving. Every single interviewer had the same reaction. Kind of a slow nod with a look that said, "Yeah, we've heard this story before." One of them, the department head at the charter school, actually laughed and said, "We get at least 2 teachers a year from public schools telling us the exact same story. Different scoreboard, same ending." The private school that interested me most was called Ridgeview Academy. Smaller than my current school, about 400 kids total. They had a dedicated STEM wing that was actually funded properly. Actual lab equipment from this decade. A robotics program with a real budget. And here's the part that made me almost laugh out loud during the tour. They had a 3D printer in the classroom, just sitting there. I'd been writing grant applications for 3 years, trying to get one at my public school, and kept getting told it wasn't in the budget. Ridgeview offered me a position teaching AP Chemistry and AP Environmental Science, plus overseeing their STEM enrichment program. The salary was $20,000 more than I was making. $20,000. Plus a professional development stipend, plus actual funding for extracurricular programs I ran. And they seemed genuinely excited to have me. Like, the head of school shook my hand at the end of the interview and said, "We've been looking for someone exactly like you." I accepted on the spot. Well, almost on the spot. I went home, took Diesel for a walk around the neighborhood, and thought about it. The whole walk I kept going back and forth. 12 years is a long time to spend somewhere. I knew every crack in the hallway tiles. I knew which water fountain had the cold water and which one tasted like a swimming pool. I knew that the third floor bathroom had a lock that stuck and you had to jiggle the handle twice. That school was as much a part of my daily life as my own apartment. But then I thought about Caleb's thank you note. I thought about the robotics kids. I thought about every morning I walked into that building genuinely excited to teach, and every afternoon I walked out feeling like the school didn't care whether I was there or not. I thought about Mrs. Hadley calling me a cornerstone while paying me like a temp. And I thought about that scoreboard, sitting out there on the football field, brand new and gleaming, costing more than my annual take-home after taxes. My mind was made up before I got back to the house. I submitted my resignation in mid-October. 2 weeks' notice. Some people will say that's not cool, quitting mid-semester. And look, I get it. But I gave that school 12 years of above and beyond work, and they gave me a $200 stipend and a pat on the back. My contract had a standard resignation clause, and I followed it to the letter. I wasn't going to burn another semester waiting for a convenient time to leave when they'd never once waited for a convenient time to deny me a raise. The day I turned in my letter, Mrs. Hadley called me into her office. She looked confused. Not angry, not sad. Confused. Like a computer that just got an input it didn't know how to process. She asked why. I told her, calmly, no dramatics. I said I'd been asking for fair compensation for years. I'd been told no every time, and I'd found a position that valued my work appropriately. I mentioned the scoreboard. I didn't yell about it. I just said, when the district can find $80,000 for a scoreboard, but can't find $5,000 for a raise for its highest performing teacher, the message is pretty clear. She did this thing where she kind of half smiled and said, well, I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm sorry you feel that way. Not, I'm sorry we failed you. Not, what can we do to keep you? Just the classic non-apology that means absolutely nothing. I said, I don't feel that way. It's just what happened. And I left. Wait. I need you to appreciate that last line. I don't feel that way. It's just what happened. That's not a comeback. That's a verbal fatality. Mrs. Hadley tried to pull the classic, sorry you feel that way card, and Bryce hit her with raw, uncut facts, like he was filing a police report. No emotion, no anger, just truth. Meanwhile, she's sitting there looking like a Windows error screen. This man didn't flip a desk, didn't raise his voice, just stated the situation and walked out. Absolute ice in his veins. And honestly, the best part hasn't even happened yet. My last 2 weeks were strange. Word got around fast, faster than I expected, honestly. By lunchtime on the day I submitted my letter, half the building knew. Teachers were split. Some of them totally understood and said they wished they had the guts to do the same. A couple of them pulled me aside in the hallway and asked where I was going. Not because they were nosy, but because they wanted to know if the same place was hiring. A few of the older ones gave me the loyalty speech, which I respected even if I disagreed with it. One teacher who'd been there 25 years told me I was making a mistake and that I'd regret it. I told her I hoped she was right. One of the football coaches actually came up to me in the parking lot and said, for what it's worth, nobody on the coaching staff asked for that scoreboard. That was all admin. I told him I appreciated that. I meant it. He also said the old scoreboard worked perfectly fine, and most of the coaches thought the money should have gone to facility repairs. So even the sports guys knew it was ridiculous. The hardest part was the students. I'm not going to pretend I kept it together perfectly, because I didn't. When I told my AP Chem class I was leaving, one of my seniors, a kid named Jolene, maybe the smartest student I've ever taught, just looked at me and said, Mr. Bryce, are you serious? And I had to take a second before I could answer. I told them the truth. Not all the details, but enough. I said I'd gotten an opportunity I couldn't pass up, and that they were going to be fine, because they were the most prepared students in the district. Which was true. The robotics kids took it the hardest. A couple of them came to my classroom after school on my last day, and gave me a card they'd all signed. One kid drew a little robot on the front holding a sign that said, "We'll miss you, Mr. B." Another one wrote, "Thanks for believing we could build stuff that actually worked." I'm not ashamed to say that one hit me right in the chest. I kept that card. It's in the same drawer as Caleb's note now. The last thing I did before I left was clean out my classroom. Took me about 2 hours. 12 years of stuff. Posters I'd made, lab equipment I'd bought, a coffee mug one of my students gave me that said, "World's Okayest Chemist." I packed it all into 4 boxes and carried them to my car. The parking lot was empty by then. It was maybe 5:30 in the evening, getting dark. I sat in my car for a minute and looked at the building. Then I drove home. And that was it. Here's where it gets interesting. After I left, the school couldn't find a replacement. Not for 3 months. 3 months of my AP Chemistry and AP Physics classes being covered by a rotating cast of substitutes who, bless them, were doing their best but were not equipped to teach college-level science courses. The AP Physics sub was a retired gym teacher. I'm not making that up. He told the kids on his first day that he wasn't really a science guy, but they'd figure it out together. Which is a nice sentiment and absolutely terrifying if you're a 17-year-old trying to pass the AP exam in May. The robotics club shut down. Nobody was willing to take it over. The kids tried to keep meeting on their own for a while, but without a faculty advisor, the school wouldn't let them use the space or the equipment, so it just died. 22 kids with nowhere to go. The academic decathlon team limped through the season with a fill-in coach from the English department who, again, great person, but didn't know the difference between an endothermic and exothermic reaction. They didn't even qualify for regionals. My AP students took the exams in May. The scores came back over the summer. I won't go into the exact numbers because I don't want to make those kids feel bad. It wasn't their fault. But the pass rate dropped by over 40%. 40%. From the highest in the district to below the district average in 1 year. Because the school couldn't find one qualified person to replace me for 3 months. And that's when the parents started losing it. The first wave was emails. Parents writing to the school board asking what happened, why the AP scores tanked, why the robotics club was gone, why the academic decathlon team went from regional champions to not even qualifying. The school board did what school boards do. They formed a committee. The committee's job was apparently to assess the impact of recent staffing transitions on student outcomes. I know this because one of my former colleagues sent me a screenshot of the email announcement, and we both had the same reaction, which was basically a long exhale. The second wave was a petition. Some group of parents put together an online petition demanding that the school board conduct a full review of spending priorities and teacher compensation. Last I heard, it had over 600 signatures, which for a school district our size is a lot. Like, that's more people than show up to the homecoming game. Then the local news picked it up. Somebody, I don't know who, tipped off a reporter at the local station, and they did a segment on it. Top science teacher leaves after being denied raise. School scrambles. They interviewed parents. They interviewed students. They even got B-roll of the scoreboard, which, I mean, you can't make that up. The reporter literally stood in front of the football field with this brand new digital scoreboard glowing behind her while she talked about how the school couldn't retain its best teacher. One parent said something like, they had $80,000 for a scoreboard, but couldn't keep the best teacher in the building. That clip apparently went semi-viral in the area. A buddy of mine who lives 2 states over texted me about it. Yo, timeout. This story just went from a workplace drama to a full-blown public meltdown, and I am here for every second of it. The local news is doing segments. Parents are writing letters. The AP scores look like they fell off a cliff. And somewhere in the background, that $80,000 scoreboard is sitting on the football field, lit up like a monument to the dumbest budget decision in school district history. You can't script irony this good. A screenwriter would look at this and say, nah, too on the nose. But nope, real life. This is what happens when you tell your MVP he should work for the love of the game and then blow the budget on Jumbotron for a .500 football team. The board held a public meeting in January. I wasn't there. I was already settled at Ridgeview by then. But 3 different people texted me about it afterwards. Apparently it was intense. Parents showed up. Like actually showed up. Not just the usual 4 people who always attend board meetings. The room was packed. People were asking pointed questions about teacher retention, about salary competitiveness, about how the district prioritizes spending. One dad apparently stood up and read my resignation letter out loud. I didn't even know they had a copy. Mrs. Hadley was at the meeting. From what I heard, she mostly sat there looking uncomfortable and deflecting questions to the superintendent. The superintendent said something about how the district values all of its teachers and is committed to competitive compensation, which is the kind of sentence that sounds great and means absolutely nothing. About a week after that meeting, I got a phone call. It was from the school board president, a guy named Gerald, who I'd met maybe twice in 12 years. He was very polite. He said the board had been reviewing the situation, and they wanted to discuss the possibility of me returning. He mentioned that they were prepared to offer a $15,000 salary increase, a formal department chair title, and additional funding for the robotics and academic decathlon programs. $15,000. After 12 years of being told there was no money. After I'd already left. After the AP scores cratered, the robotics club died, and the whole thing became a news story. I thanked Gerald for the call. I told him I was genuinely appreciative that the board recognized the issue and was trying to address it. And then I told him I was going to respectfully decline. He paused for a long time. Then he asked if there was a number that would change my mind. I said it wasn't about the number anymore. I told him I was at Ridgeview now, making $20,000 more than I'd been making at his school, with actual resources and a team that treated me like a professional instead of a volunteer. I told him I hoped the board would use this as a reason to invest in the teachers they still had, because there were a lot of great ones still in that building who deserved better. He thanked me and said he understood, said he wished me well. We hung up. After the call, I wrote a short, polite email to Gerald, formally declining the offer. I thanked the board for reaching out, wished the school well, and said I hoped they'd invest in the teachers who were still there. I read it over 3 times to make sure it didn't sound bitter or smug, because I wasn't trying to rub it in. I just wanted to be clear. I sat there for a minute after sending it. I won't lie. There was a tiny part of me that felt a pull. 12 years is a long time. Those hallways, those classrooms, those kids. The robotics lab that smelled like solder and burnt rubber. The sound of students arguing about whether something was an acid or a base. I missed it. Parts of it anyway. But I didn't miss being told my work was a calling every time I asked to be paid fairly for it. I didn't miss buying my own supplies. I didn't miss watching administrators approve 5-figure purchases for athletics while telling me the science budget was frozen. I didn't miss Mrs. Hadley's empty smile and her non-answers. Final update. It's been about 5 months since I started at Ridgeview. I'm not going to say it's perfect because nowhere is perfect, and I'd be lying. The commute is slightly longer. The parking lot is weirdly small. One of the other science teachers has this habit of microwaving fish in the faculty lounge, which, if you've ever experienced that, you know is basically a war crime. But the work is great. My AP students are engaged, and I actually have the materials I need to teach them properly. I started a robotics program here, and the school gave me a real budget for it, not $200 and a pat on the head. We've already got 15 kids signed up, and Nate's been helping me source parts again. Except this time, I'm not paying for half of them out of my own pocket. I got an email from Caleb a few weeks ago. He's a sophomore at Georgia Tech now, doing some kind of mechanical engineering project involving autonomous drones. He said he heard I'd left and wanted to make sure I was okay. I told him I was better than okay. He said, "Good. You deserved better than that place." Coming from a 20-year-old, that hit different. Last thing. A couple weeks ago, one of my old colleagues told me that Mrs. Hadley quietly moved to a different role within the district over the summer. Nobody's confirming whether she was reassigned or chose to leave, but the timing is interesting. The new principal apparently reached out to the board about actually adjusting the teacher salary scale. Whether that goes anywhere, I have no idea. I hope it does. For the teachers still there, I genuinely hope it does. As for the robotics club at my old school, as far as I know, it's still gone. Nobody picked it up. 22 kids who had something meaningful to do after school, something that taught them problem solving and teamwork, and got at least one of them a full scholarship. And it just disappeared because the school couldn't keep one teacher. I don't regret leaving. Not even a little. I gave that school everything I had for 12 years, and when I asked for something back, they pointed at a scoreboard and told me to feel grateful. So I found a place that didn't confuse dedication with desperation. But I do still think about those robotics kids. I wonder what they're doing after school now. I wonder if they still build stuff on their own time. I wonder if any of them will end up like Caleb someday, and if they'll have somebody in their corner when they do. Anyway, that's the whole story. Did I do the right thing by leaving mid-semester, or should I have stuck it out until the end of the year? Man, this one stuck with me. Bryce gave that school 12 years of his life, built programs from nothing, sent kids to top universities, and they couldn't even match the state average salary. But they found 80 grand for a scoreboard real quick. And the best part? When it all fell apart, they came back offering $15,000 like it was some kind of generous peace offering. Bro, that man is already making 20,000 more somewhere that actually respects him. I love it. Drop a comment. Do you think Bryce was right to leave mid-semester, or should he have waited? Subscribe if you haven't already, hit the notification bell, and I'll see you in the next one.